This very special bread is Italian. It's called Focaccia. And now you've learned how to make bread dough, you can start branching out and making different breads. The dough is made in the same way as before, but this time a tablespoon of oil is added along with the warm water. Here I've got our cookery school oblong tin with its liner. And first, 1 tablespoon of olive oil is brushed over the base and the sides of the liner. This is the dough which, as before, has had its first rise and the air has been knocked out. Place it in the tin and, using a clenched fist, push it towards all the corners of the tin. Now, as you will see, the gluten has really developed, so you need to be quite assertive to get it all round. Leave the dough as before, placing the tin inside a large oiled bag with a clip. It'll take about an hour for the dough to rise a second time to the top of the tin. Now that's happened, so next you need to make indentations all over with your finger, going almost down to the base. Then, in a bowl, combine 2 tablespoons of cold water, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and a teaspoon of fine salt. And whisk together until it emulsifies and looks like this. Now drizzle this all over the surface of the bread, letting it flow into the holes and finally all over. It always looks like too much here, but don't worry, it will all be absorbed. Next, put a small sprig of rosemary into each hole like this and scatter a few more rosemary leaves all over, before popping it back into the bag for 15 minutes until it becomes puffy again. Then sprinkle the surface with a teaspoon of salt flakes and bake it in a preheated oven, 220 degrees centigrade, gas mark 7, on the centre shelf for 20 to 25 minutes. When it's baked, lift the bread from the tin by holding the liner at the sides. Put it on a cooling rack, then using a palette knife to help you, slide the focaccia off the liner onto the rack to cool. We love it served slightly warm with little dishes of Italian extra virgin olive oil to dip into. Now I want to show you a very different but equally special bread. This is a potato bread with goat's cheese and thyme. But you can use any cheese. It works well with feta and roquefort. In my bowl, I've got 175 grams of self-raising flour, which has been sifted, and I'm adding 1 level teaspoon of salt, and this time a rounded teaspoon of baking powder. Now I'm going to add a really generous pinch of cayenne pepper and a heaped teaspoon of chopped thyme leaves. If you're using other cheese, other herbs like rosemary can be used. With a palette knife now, mix everything together. Using the coarse side of a grater, grate 1 medium Desiree potato into the bowl. Desiree are the best because of the flavour and the very firm texture. Then I'm adding 4 chopped spring onions, including the green part. And here I've got 110 grams of soft goat's cheese cut into cubes. Add about 2/3 now and save the rest for later. Now I'm just going to use the palette knife and combine all those ingredients together. In this little bowl I've got 1 egg, and I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of milk and 1 heaped teaspoon of grain mustard, and just beat them together. There are lots of ingredients in this bread, but you will see why when you taste it. Now, still using the palette knife, just bring the mixture together into a really rough dough. Then finish off with your hands until it leaves the bowl clean. Next, transfer the whole lot onto a greased baking sheet and using your hands, pile it quite high as it tends to spread out during the cooking. Now, lightly press the rest of the cheese in little blobs all over the surface. And then sprinkle generously with flour and add a few sprigs of thyme just here and there. Now bake for 45 to 50 minutes on the centre shelf of a preheated oven at 190 degrees centigrade or gas Mark 5. When the loaf is cooked, cool it on a wire rack, and it's really lovely served still warm. It's crisp on the outside and soft and a little bit squidgy within. No need to serve it with butter, it's just lovely all on its own. Now we're just going to have a little bit of fun. This is another Italian recipe called Pinzini. The dough is made in a similar way as before, except a third of the water is replaced with olive oil. After its first rise, the dough is rolled out and cut into little triangles, then placed on a lined baking sheet inside an oiled polythene bag. Then give it a second rise for about 30 minutes. These are shallow fried in just 300 ml of olive oil in a little gem pan. Test it by adding a small piece of dough. If it turns golden in 30 seconds, the oil is ready. Then just fry the pinzini 4 or 5 at a time. Give them 30 seconds on each side. As you cook them, transfer them to a plate lined with kitchen paper. The recipe comes from a place called Ferrara, where they serve them with Parma ham and salamis. It's a sublime combination. If you've got any questions, join our forum or one of our live web chats.